on to setting up your database migration. So this is a really helpful article that honestly I go back to every time I need to set up a migration with NestJS and Postgres, okay? So we're gonna go ahead, we already set up the database initially, so now we're just kind of moving files around and creating some scripts within package.json, which I already copied and pasted into here, but we'll get to that part. The idea is that if I wanted to go and I wanted to add a column, or I wanted to change the type or do anything, or even add a new entity to my database, I would run into issues potentially about having this synchronized value or property set to true. Okay, because the synchronize in here is going to look for any differences between the entities that are in this array and your database, and then they're going to update it immediately, right? And so sometimes if you have data that's not in your database that doesn't fit properly with those changes, you just automatically wipe it. Running the migration instead, you are running the migration and it's doing it one step at a time. So it's safer for your data, okay? So the first thing that you can see is that they are going to set up this config page. So I'm going to just copy this whole thing, and then we are going to be able to swap out our values. So we are going to create in source a folder called config. Okay, and then we are going to add a type orm.ts file. We are going to paste in everything. So it looks like, I'm just gonna save. Okay, so type Postgres makes sense. We do want it to be product.env.database host. Let's open up our env copy here to make sure everything's named the same. So database host, yep. Database port, good. Database username, database password, database name, good. All right. So this is going to be the trickier part, okay? So here is the entities, okay? If you look at this though, it looks like some mumbo jumbo, but I will explain it. So the dist folder. If you haven't really paid attention before, you might have a dist folder here. When you are using TypeScript, TypeScript needs to be compiled into JavaScript to then be read, okay, and used. So when you are building your project, you use npm run build, okay, and it compiles all of your code and then makes it usable. The dist folder is where that compiled code gets scored or gets saved, okay? So we are saying here that the entities, right, those entity files are going to be in the dist folder, okay? Then they're going to be in any folder within the dist folder. Then within those folders, it's going to have the end of the path be .entity.either ts or .js, okay? So we can either edit this path to make sense for us, okay? Or we can add this guy to a folder. Does that make sense? Because when I go ahead and, so let's actually do that. Okay, so I'm going to delete my dist folder here. Delete. And then I'm going to do the command npm run build, which builds my dist folder. Oh, I'm not in my API. Okay, here. Where then we're going to run npm run build. Okay, so now it's building me that, did you see it pop up, that dist folder? So we're gonna go in and we're gonna look and we see that name entity pops up right in the main root, okay? So we could go ahead and just get rid of that part, because that part here is saying look in any folder within dist for a file name entity. Well, the only folder in dist is this config, so it would look in this config folder for something that has the end entity.ts or entity.js, which would be nothing. If I get rid of this, it's going to look at anything within the whole dist folder that ends in entity.ts or JS. So hopefully it picks up the name entities. Okay? The next thing that we're going to look at is the migrations. Okay? So this is saying that this is going to be helping us for when we generate a migration, where we put that file, and then when we run the migration, where we look for the migration to run. Okay? So we don't have any migration folder right now, but we are going to make one. So we're going to make one in source, and we are going to do add folder. We're going to call it migrations. And we're not going to do anything with the folder right now, because when we run this command here, that's in our package JSON that we copied in, right? It is going to generate a migration and throw it in that folder. Okay? So we should be good, but let's go ahead and delete our dist folder. And then we're going to run npm run build again to see if that migrations folder pops up. All right. And I see a config. Don't see a migrations folder. I think it might be because we have nothing in the migrations folder right now, and we don't build, when we build a migration, we don't, when we do npm run build, we don't bring in empty folders. So we will note, okay, might be nervous about that, but we will see. Okay, so this should be kind of all set, other than this part here. I'm gonna, for safe measures, remove that, because .env config should look, is using the .env package, and it should just look in the root folder, which is where our env file is. Okay? All right, so let's move on to the next part. So now we're gonna do some edits to our app.module, because we no longer need this type ORM for root the way it is, because instead we are going to be using the type ORM for root async here. We are going to import and that's a formatting problem, so we're going to do that. All right. And we are going to edit our config module for root a little bit, because we want to load in type ORM, which is here we are registering our config here. We're registering it, so it's returning the config, and we're registering it, naming it type ORM, if that makes sense. So here we can go ahead and do, I'm just going to copy this whole object. Is global true means that this config is going to then be accessible in all of our files, which is nice. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we are going to import that. All right. So hopefully that works. So we're going to go to our package JSON now. So yeah, I got these commands here. I got them from here, and I edited them a little bit. So I just copied and pasted them from an old project. Okay. So here we have migration run. We also copied in the type ORM command, and then we have migration generate. Okay. So the way that it works is type ORM is a command in itself, and then our migration run is going to call that script within it. So here we are saying npm run type ORM. We're saying npm run this script here, okay, which we're going to go get from our node modules. We're going to go get the type ORM CLI that we can use, okay? And then when we're generating a migration, we are saying generate a migration from the source folder, or we're saying generate the migration to the source folder and then the migrations folder. So that's what, this is where we're saying we're putting that migration into it. And then after the slash is what we're going to name it. So we're going to say add column to name. Okay. So let's go make a change to our name. Let's add a column. And we are going to call this, what should we call this? Let's call this middle name. Okay. I am going to clean out, well, let's go ahead and let's look up type ORM nullable. Because what's going to happen is nullable boolean. All right. So right now this column doesn't exist, but we already have quite a bit of data in our database. So we either need to clear the data out of our database or we need to make name. So now that we cleared or we need to make the middle name like nullable. But what we're going to do instead is we're to clear the database out because I actually want to just change this to first name, last name. But you can kind of already see the issue, right? If you don't plan out your schema well and then you start changing things in your schema, if you have data in your database, you could potentially cause an issue when you were, so if I had sync, right, as soon as I saved this, if synchronize was set to true, then I would go and wipe out this data because now the column name doesn't exist. So it's gonna try to force it to match what I have. All right, so it is mad at me here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just comment this. I'm gonna comment this whole thing out so I have no red squigglies, and we will edit this in a second. Add name. And we'll worry about that in a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna close out of the controller. We'll leave the module up just in case we have an issue. We'll open this up and we'll close up that. Okay, so now we are in the API folder. Okay, so we are going to first clear my terminal. Then I'm going to delete my dist folder. I just like to run npm run build before every time because when we run the migration, it's going to use the dist folder, right? So we want to make sure after we run a migration generate, which we haven't run yet, so we'll have to do this again. We want to make sure the build is set up properly. I'm going to copy this and we're going to give it a try. npm run migration generate. So if we did this correctly, it will then put a file in this migrations folder named add column to name with like a big number attached to it. All right, fingers crossed. All right, migration has been generated successfully. Yay. All right, so then, yep, if you look at the name, we have a big long number and add column to name. Okay, so now if we were to look at our database, you'll see that nothing is different because we just generated the migration, okay? Let's take a look at what the migration is doing. So the migration is looking at what your table was like before and then the changes you made to it. So here we dropped the column name, okay? And then we added the column first name, and then we added the column last name, okay? So this is the up function. So when we run the migration, it's gonna call this up function. It's gonna create these things. We could also call the down, which would take away, do the opposite of generating the migration, and it would drop the first and last name and then add the name. So if we wanted to undo the migration, that is the function we would use, okay? So now, if we look in our dist folder, now we have our columns, which is kind of cool because I always run npm run build after my migration, but now I'm thinking I might not need to. All right, so then I can go ahead and run npm run. Then we're gonna take this, migration run, and enter. And now this should edit, yep, and you see the logs, right? It dropped the column name, so this column will be gone when we refresh our page, and then it added the column first name and last name. So let's go ahead and take a look. Woo! And we did our first database migration. Pretty cool. All right, so let's go ahead and edit our, what's this running on? 3002. Let's go ahead and edit this so that way it works before we call it a day. make sure everything gets put together properly. Okay, so we are going to have type in a first name. Okay, so we're going to call this first name, set first name. Let's put this as Callie. Let's copy this so we can have a last name then. All right, and let's put this to Stove's Cup. Okay, and we are going to do first name, last name. All right, on change, we will set first name. I'm not gonna worry about the input right now. I'm just gonna hard code it, okay? So we got the front end changed. Let's go ahead and update the controller. So we had commented that out. Obviously that's not going to work. So we're gonna have body, first name. Okay, and then we're gonna add a comma. And we're gonna have at body, last name. I put my parentheses in the wrong spot. All right, and then we are going to add name, first name, comma, last name. I'm probably not going to lie, doing too much right now without testing. So I would not be surprised if this doesn't work. And then we're gonna have to do a little bit of debugging to find where things went wrong. All right, I don't think this is what they're named in the column, right? It's first underscore name. So we're to say, and then let's just make sure this is first name. Yeah, okay. So this is gonna be first underscore name is equal to first name. And this is gonna be last underscore name is equal to last name. All right, so not sure this is correct. We did a lot at once, but we're gonna go ahead and click add name and see what happens. I'm gonna add a console log here so we can at least see first name, comma, last name, what's coming in. All right, so Callie Stove's Cup was the name. I didn't get any error messages. Let's check our database. Okay, so we want to do, let's do another one. So we can do our get names. Oh, we don't even need to do that. Let's check the actual database and not Postman. Refresh. Oh, looks like it worked. Let's check our console logs to see if our object came back. Oh, you know what? I'm not console logging it on the front end anymore. That's okay. All right, so let's do const response equals console.log response. Okay, let's try it. All right, we have 3 items in the database. They're all Callie Stove's Cup. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and add another input. We'll say type in a last name. Okay. I'm not gonna worry too much about my CSS right now. All right, so let's change this to change first name. Let's copy this and we will say on change last name. All right, let's see how this works. So I'm gonna type in Mickey, mouse, add. I got 4 back. And the last one is mouse Stove's Cup, and that's because we set first name twice. So we're going to change this to set last name. Let's try it one more time. I'm going to clear it. Let's do Donald Duck add. And we have Donald Duck. All right, so our migration successfully worked. We were able to change the name entity. And now anytime you make a change, all right, you can go ahead and run migration generate and migration run. If you're having issues, use the dist folder to verify that your paths are correct. Make sure you might need to run npm run build to make sure your dist folder is up to date. And yeah, that is how you use migrations.